The blizzard had already erased the world into a single sheet of white when Daniel Hale staggered forward with his scarf frozen stiff against his neck, the cold slicing through every layer he wore like invisible knives. But he kept walking because the frantic signal he'd intercepted hadn't sounded like any human distress call. It had been high and trembling and terrified, the kind of sound a child makes when the world is ending around them. And Daniel had heard enough of those in war to know he could never ignore one again. His boots sank deep with every step, snow swallowing his legs, wind screaming across the valley as if trying to push him back. Yet he kept forcing his numb muscles to move because the coordinates on his HUD kept blinking red, urging him closer. And then out of the storm, he saw a faint shimmer of blue light flickering irregularly like a dying pulse. Daniel squinted, breath shaking, and stepped toward it until the shape resolved into a broken escape pod half buried in snow, its hull split open and its interior systems sparking weakly. He ripped off the ice-coated hatch and leaned inside, expecting maybe a wounded scout or a smuggler, but instead he froze, shocked still. Because curled inside like fragile birds were two small alien children, their bodies trembling violently, their skin an iridescent pale silver that dulled with every breath they tried to take, eyes too large for their tiny faces, glowing faintly as they tried to focus on him with fear and exhaustion tangled together. The older one tried to raise a trembling hand as if to shield the younger, but his strength collapsed halfway and he sagged against the broken metal. And Daniel's heart clenched so hard he forgot the cold biting into him, forgot the storm, forgot everything except the instinct that had driven him since the war ended. The instinct to protect anyone too small to fight back, no matter the species or the politics screaming on the news. "It's okay. I've got you," he whispered, voice raw from the cold. Though he knew they couldn't understand his words, but they understood tone. Their shivering eased just enough for the younger one to blink slowly at him, a silent plea not to leave them. Daniel slipped his arms beneath their fragile bodies, and the moment he lifted them, he felt their icy skin through his gloves. Far colder than should be possible, hypothermia already wrapping its claws around them. And panic hit him hard because he didn't know how their physiology handled cold. He didn't know how long they had, but he knew it wasn't long. The older child made a weak sound, not quite a word, not quite a whimper, but full of fear that struck straight through him, and Daniel leaned closer to reassure him, feeling the tiny fingers gripping the edge of his jacket as if holding on to the last warm thing left in existence. Wind roared harder, snow thickening into a curtain that swallowed everything beyond a few feet. And Daniel forced himself into motion, clutching the children against his chest, shielding them with his body, their fragile breaths brushing weakly against his collar, and he could feel the younger one slipping in and out of consciousness. Every step felt heavier, the blizzard pushing him like a living force, testing him, challenging him. But Daniel pushed back with the same stubborn defiance that had carried him through collapsed cities and burning fields during the war. And as he navigated the uneven snow, his mind kept replaying the same thought again and again. That he had found them for a reason, that fate didn't throw two dying children into a storm for nothing. The older one stirred faintly, pressing his forehead against Daniel's chest, and Daniel felt a sudden pulse of warmth beneath his gloves, a dim flicker of bioluminescence trying to survive inside a body that was losing its battle against the cold. And it sharpened Daniel's resolve until he felt something fierce ignite in him. "You're going to make it," he murmured, as if promising the storm itself, shifting their weight to shield their faces from the flying ice. Feeling the younger child cling to his shirt with the last scraps of strength, their tiny breaths quivering with fear and hope all at once. He walked blindly through the whiteout, relying on muscle memory and instinct, the cold chewing its way into his bones, his vision blurring around the edges. But then a faint vibration rippled through the air, so subtle he almost mistook it for the storm. until the snow beneath his boots trembled again. Heavier this time, rhythmic, deliberate. Engines, not wind, not thunder, not nature. Engines approaching fast, their vibrations rolling through the frozen ground like an oncoming beast. Daniel tightened his hold on the children, instinct spiraling into protectiveness so sharp it felt like fire in his chest. And he turned slowly as four shadowy shapes materialized through the storm, dark blocks moving with controlled purpose. Headlights cutting through the snow in harsh white beams that landed directly on him. For SUVs, armored, heavy, government, or something worse. Engines rumbling like a warning, their silhouettes growing clearer as they circled through the storm toward him. The older alien child felt the tension spike in Daniel's heartbeat and whimpered softly, burying his face against Daniel's jacket as if sensing the danger rolling closer. Daniel lowered his stance slightly, shielding the children even more. Every instinct he'd tried to bury since the war rising again, urging him to prepare, urging him to protect, urging him to fight if he had to. He didn't know who these people were. He didn't know what they wanted, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. No one was taking these children from his arms. Not tonight. Not in this storm. Not while he still had breath in his body. The SUVs rolled closer through the storm with a slow, predatory confidence. Engines growling beneath the howl of the wind. And Daniel could feel the air around him shifting as if the blizzard itself stepped back in anticipation of what was coming. The headlights carved harsh white tunnels through the snow until they framed him squarely in their beams, the glare burning against his frozen eyes while he tightened his grip on the two alien children, whose shivering bodies clung to him with instinctive fear, their tiny fingers digging into his jacket as though they knew whatever approached was far more dangerous than the storm trying to swallow them. The first SUV halted only a few meters away, snow spraying up around its tires, and the others formed a half-circle behind it, coordinated with military precision that made old memories stir inside Daniel like ghosts waking from long graves. Memories of checkpoints and night raids and moments when a single wrong step meant never coming home again. His pulse sharpened, but his mind remained steady. That old soldier's calm settling into place as he shifted his stance to protect the children without appearing threatening. Though every cell in his body wanted to fight or flee, a door opened with a heavy mechanical thud, and a tall figure stepped out wrapped in black tactical gear that absorbed the dim light rather than reflecting it. A visor covered their face, hiding any expression. But Daniel didn't need to see eyes to feel the authority radiating from them like cold steel. Their posture was rigid, purposeful, the stance of someone trained to make decisions without hesitation, trained to retrieve assets, trained to eliminate obstacles. The older child whimpered softly, a faint melodic cry that trembled with fear. And Daniel lowered his head just enough to whisper a reassurance even though his breath shook with his own tension. He felt the younger one press closer, burying their face against his chest while their faint bioluminescent glow flickered weakly beneath their skin. A heartbeat of light fighting not to go out. The figure approached slowly, boots crunching in the snow, each step deliberate as if announcing ownership of the ground between them. And when they stopped an arm's length away, their voice crackled through a helmet speaker, distorted by static but unmistakably human. "Step away from the children," they ordered. The tone flat, official, stripped of humanity. The kind of voice that belonged to someone following rules rather than instinct. Daniel's jaw clenched, and he adjusted his grip around the children instead of loosening it, feeling their trembling increase, feeling their breaths shorten with fear. And the protective fire inside him surged until he felt heat in his frozen fingers. "They're freezing," he called back, keeping his voice steady but loud enough to cut through the storm. "They won't survive without immediate warmth." The figure didn't react, didn't soften, didn't shift. Only repeated the command with colder precision. "Step away now," behind them. The windows of the SUVs darkened as silhouettes moved inside, More personnel, more eyes, watching him like he was the threat in this equation. Like a human carrying to half-frozen alien children was somehow the danger. And the insult of that scraped against memories Daniel had worked years to bury. He inhaled deeply, steadying his breath, letting the storm's icy sting clear his mind, because panic helped no one, especially the dying children pressed against him. He could feel their trembling weakening, feel their glow fading, and he whispered softly to them, even as his heart pounded with dread. "Stay with me, I've got you." The lead operative took another step forward, close enough that Daniel could see frost collecting on the visor. And this time, their voice carried something sharper beneath the cold professionalism. Something like urgency or fear masked behind duty. "Those children fall under Galactic provisional law. You are not authorized to intervene," they said, as if quoting from a manual written by people who had never held a dying child in their arms. "Release them now, or we will take custody by force." The Blizard screamed louder, swirling violently around the cluster of vehicles as if the storm itself reacted to the rising tension. And Daniel felt a tremor of instinct ripple through him, the old soldier inside waking fully, calculating escape routes, terrain angles, the number of armed bodies versus his own ability to shield the children. And the odds were terrible, but he didn't move. The older child lifted a hand weakly, touching Daniel's coat near his collar, as if sensing the conflict inside him, their wide silver eyes reflecting the headlights in trembling shards of light, silently begging him not to let go, silently trusting him, even though they barely knew him. And that tiny expression of faith shattered something inside Daniel so completely that he felt his fear burn away, leaving only fierce determination in its place. "I'm not stepping away," he said quietly but firmly, his voice steady despite the shaking in his frozen limbs. "They need help, not armed retrieval." Silence fell, a heavy unnatural pause in which the storm seemed to hold its breath. The engines idled like beasts waiting for a command. The figures in the other SUVs went still. And for a heartbeat, Daniel felt the world narrow into a single, fragile thread stretched between him and the children he held. Then something unexpected happened. The lead operative hesitated, not long. Just a flicker of pause, barely noticeable, but enough for Daniel to sense a fracture in their resolve. As if they too recognized the moral weight of the moment, as if they too were human beneath a visor. But the hesitation shattered instantly as a voice crackled through their come from one of the other SUVs. Sharper, angrier. "Unit 1, retrieve the assets immediately. The warship enters orbit in under 3 minutes." Daniel's blood froze colder than the storm because the meaning behind that sentence hit him with brutal clarity. If a warship was arriving, then these children weren't just refugees or lost travelers. They were valuable, important, connected to something far larger than anyone on Earth had been told. And if the warship was coming for them, then these SUVs weren't here to help. They were here to control a narrative, to control him, to control the fate of 2 terrified children whose lives were slipping away with every beat of their weakening hearts. The operatives straightened as if the order had solidified their spine, and they reached for Daniel with a gloved hand. Daniel stepped back instantly, tightening his hold on the children with a protective instinct so fierce it felt like his own heartbeat roared inside the storm. "No one is taking them," he whispered under his breath as the blizzard raged around them like a living witness to the moment fate shifted its course. Not the SUVs, not the operatives hiding behind law and protocol, not even the incoming warship descending from the heavens. Because Daniel Hale had already made his choice. And once a soldier chose who he would protect, the whole galaxy could burn before he let harm touch them. The operative's gloved hand remained suspended in the air between them. Fingers curled slightly, as if poised to seize one of the children the instant Daniel's grip loosened. But Daniel stepped back again, boots sinking into the deep snow. The children held firmly against his chest. their faint, trembling echoing through him like a second heartbeat. And in that tense stillness, he felt their fear rising in waves. A silent plea threading into his skin as if their emotions seeped into him through touch. Not human, not linguistic, but something deeper, older, instinctive. The older child pressed a glowing palm weakly against his coat, and a tiny pulse of light spread in a brief shimmer that warmed his skin through the cold fabric. A fragile spark that felt impossibly alive in the blizzard's frozen cruelty. And Daniel realized with a shiver that wasn't from the cold that these children were not ordinary refugees, not simple escapees. Their bodies carried something ancient, something powerful. Something tied to the warship, descending toward them through layers of cloud and storm. He could feel it thrumming beneath their skin like a dormant star waiting to ignite. The operative stiffened at the glow, shifting into a more aggressive stance, their visor turning sharply toward the children as though scanning their energy. And Daniel saw that flicker of fear hide behind the authority in their posture. Fear not of him, but of the children, the same children who were too weak to lift their heads against his shoulder. And that realization twisted inside him, raising more questions than answers. "What aren't you telling me?" Daniel murmured under his breath. His voice swallowed by the raging wind, but heard by the children who clung tighter. The older one's weak fingers gripping his jacket with desperate insistence. The operative advanced, boots crunching through the snow with sharp intent. And the storm seemed to recoil from their presence. The snowfall swirling in erratic spirals as if disturbed by the tension rippling through the air. "You don't understand what you're carrying," the operative said. Tone strained now, no longer strictly professional. "Those children are not meant for human contact. Release them before you doom yourself, doom." The word lingered like a whispered prophecy. But Daniel didn't flinch, didn't loosen his arms. Because the children tightened their grip the moment the operative spoke, their fear radiating through him in a trembling wave. And he felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness rise so sharply it bordered on pain. "Look at them," Daniel called out over the storm, his voice cracking with cold and fury. "They're dying. And you're talking about protocols?" The operative's visor tilted slightly, as if searching his face for weakness or doubt. "We're following orders for the sake of the planet," they said. "You don't know what they are capable of when their bodies stabilize. You don't know the danger." The younger child shuddered violently against Daniel's chest, their bioluminescence flickering erratically like a failing star. And Daniel felt the faint warmth draining fast. Their small breaths turning shallow and uneven, their skin losing its shimmer entirely. And panic thudded through him like a drumbeat because he knew they were slipping. He dropped to one knee in the snow without thinking, shielding their fragile bodies from the biting wind, brushing frost from their cheeks as their large silver eyes fluttered in confusion and fear. The older one shifting weakly to cover the younger with their own trembling limbs. A gesture so heartbreakingly instinctive that Daniel felt something crack open inside him. "These are kids," he whispered, voice thick, shaking. "How can any law justify letting them freeze?" The operative hesitated again. Another fracture in their resolve, a silent glitch in the armor of orders they'd been given. But the cum inside their helmet crackled sharply before they could speak. "Unit 1, confirm retrieval status," a cold voice demanded. "The warship is breaching atmospheric threshold. If the assets are not secured before visual contact, we lose containment. Proceed by any means necessary. Containment, assets, warship." The words spun through Daniel's mind like shards of ice. And suddenly everything snapped into horrifying clarity. The children weren't being rescued. They were being controlled, hidden, contained, feared. And whatever the warship wanted with them was enough to send Earth officials into military lockdown. The older child stirred at the sound of the cum, their glowing eyes widening in terror. And a soft note escaped their throat. "Not human, not linguistic, but filled with a resonant ache that vibrated through Daniel's ribs. An alien cry shaped not by vocal cords, but by pure emotion. And the moment it left them, the storm itself seemed to pause, the wind faltering as if listening. Daniel felt the sound inside him rather than hearing it fully, a harmonic trembling that stirred some deep instinct. And in the flicker of bioluminescent light from the child's skin, he saw it. A shimmer of symbols glowing faintly across their forearms. Intricate patterns pulsing like a heartbeat. Ancient and luminous, something that reacted to fear. Something that responded to proximity. Daniel stared, breath stumbling. Because the symbols brightened faintly whenever his heartbeat quickened, as though syncing with him, as though recognizing something in him the way the children did. The operative recoiled a step when they saw the glow intensify. Raising a weapon with trembling caution, "Don't let them activate," they snapped, fear slicing through their false composure. "If their cores awaken, we don't have the means to contain them." Daniel pulled the children closer instinctively. "They're scared, that's all," he shot back. But the operative shook their heads sharply. "You think fear is harmless?" they said, voice rising. "Their kind doesn't just feel emotion. They project it, amplify it, weaponize it. They are living conduits." Daniel stared at the children as the words crashed into him, because the patterns on their skin pulsed again in time with his own heartbeat, as though echoing his determination, his defiance, his protective fury. And he felt warmth spread faintly through his arms where he held them. Not physical heat, but something deeper, a connection, a bond forming in real time. Not dangerous, not hostile, but living. The operative advanced aggressively now. Weapon raised, fear and duty tangled in their voice. "Last warning, release them or we neutralize all three of you." The children cried out at the surge of threat, their glowing skin trembling with unstable light. And Daniel rose slowly to his feet, cold biting into his legs. Storm swirling violently around him. He didn't shout, didn't posture, didn't show fear. He simply stared at the line of armored soldiers through the storm and felt the children cling to him with desperate trust, their glowing patterns sinking to the steady beat of his heart. And in that moment, Daniel understood something with absolute certainty. Whatever these children were, whatever mystery their species carried, whatever destiny the warship descending toward Earth demanded, they had already chosen him. And he had already chosen them. The storm raged. The SUVs idled like predators preparing to strike. The warship's distant thunder cracked across the sky. And the fate of 3 lives balanced on a breath suspended in frozen air. Daniel exhaled slowly. "No one is touching them," he whispered like a vow the universe itself would have to answer. And the glow beneath the children's skin brightened in response, as if destiny had just awakened, and recognized him and claimed him as theirs. The storm writhed around them like a living creature as Daniel stood facing a half-circle of armed operatives whose weapons tracked his every breath. The 2 alien children trembling in his arms with a fear so raw he could feel it pulse beneath their glowing skin. And the sky above them rumbled with a distant thunder that didn't belong to weather. A low vibrating roar that grew heavier with each passing second. The warship descending through clouds that flashed faint streaks of alien light as if reality itself strained against its arrival. The operatives tightened formation, the lead stepping forward with the stiff posture of someone caught between fear and duty. Their visor reflecting the faint blue glow emanating from the children pressed against Daniel's chest. "Back away now," the operative shouted, voice trembling beneath its mechanical distortion. "If that warship gets a lock on them, we lose all control of this situation." Daniel didn't move. Didn't blink, didn't breathe in fear, his body locking into that old familiar resolve from battlefields long past. The same feeling he used to get when civilians hid behind him and artillery screamed overhead. The instinct that said if he gave an inch now, someone innocent would die. And the children's tiny hands tightened around his coat as if they sensed that his resolve was their last anchor in a collapsing world. The ground trembled again, harder this time, snow vibrating beneath his boots, and Daniel lifted his gaze to the sky, just in time to see a massive shadow cutting through the storm front. A shape too large, too silent, too impossibly smooth to be anything built by human hands. Its hull glowing with shifting lunar patterns like veins of moonlight running across a living creature. The warship descending fast, bringing with it a pressure in the air so heavy Daniel felt the children instinctively curl tighter against him, their glowing markings fluttering with panic as if resonating with the ship's presence. But then something strange happened. The younger child lifted their head weakly, their half-lidded silver eyes flickering open. And when they stared at the sky, Daniel felt a sudden warmth bloom against his chest. Not physical heat, but an emotional surge that radiated outward like a beacon, an instinctive signal of recognition. The warship responded, a hum, low and resonant, rolled through the atmosphere, and every operative jerked as their cum units crackled violently, shrieking static as the alien frequency collided with their equipment, sparks jumping from several visors, weapons stuttering in hand as if the ship's presence scrambled everything that relied on human technology. But Daniel felt none of that. Instead, he felt the children's emotions pour into him like warm water filling frozen cracks. Not words, not thoughts, but a deep, aching longing. A mixture of relief and sorrow, and something painfully familiar to him. The feeling of recognizing home after losing it for too long. The operative panicked, shouting orders into a useless cum. Block the signal, block the signal. They're connecting to the ship, but Daniel knew that wasn't what was happening. The children weren't connecting to the ship. The ship was connecting to them, and the glow beneath their skin brightened, spreading across their limbs in intricate symbols that pulsed in perfect sync with Daniel's own rising heartbeat. The operative raised their weapon again, desperation cracking their voice. Step away from them, or I swear, but the threat cut off mid-sentence, because the twist hit like a tidal shock. From the sky behind the descending warship, a second presence tore through the storm. Not a ship, not machinery, but a voice, a colossal, echoing, ancient voice that spoke directly into Daniel's mind without sound. Without language, without permission, guardian found, Daniel collapsed to one knee, gasping as the force of it slammed into him. A mental weight so vast it felt like standing beneath a collapsing star. The children clung tightly, their glow flaring bright enough to illuminate the swirling snow around them in a halo of shimmering silver. The operatives froze, weapons half raised, every one of them turning violently in confusion as their instruments went dead. Their visors flickered, their cum screamed with static before cutting out entirely. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears as the voice surged again, filling him with crushing warmth and unbearable sorrow entwined together. Lineage confirmed, echo awakened. Protector restored, his breath caught because the words meant nothing and everything at once. A puzzle piece he didn't know he was missing, sliding violently into place. His mind spinning as memories that weren't his flickered across his vision. Flashes of cosmic landscapes, luminous beings of light, and a war unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. The older child reached up and touched his cheek gently, their tiny hand glowing against his skin. And the moment they did, Daniel felt a thread of understanding snap into clarity. These children had not chosen him by accident. They had recognized something inside him that he didn't know existed, some dormant echo, some inherited spark, some connection to their species buried deep within him, like ancient DNA waiting for the right moment to awaken. The operative stepped back in horror as Daniel's skin shimmered with faint traces of light beneath the surface. A soft flicker that mirrored the children's markings. Not as bright, not as developed, but unmistakable. Impossible, the operative whispered, stumbling. Weapon lowering as though facing something sacred or catastrophic. Humans aren't compatible. This cannot be. The warship descended lower still, almost touching the storm's lowest clouds. Its presence massive and terrifying, yet carrying an aura of reverence directed only at Daniel. The children pressed their glowing foreheads to his chest, their emotions swirling through him in a trembling blend of fear, trust, and recognition. They hadn't just chosen him for shelter. They had found him because he was meant to protect them. Because his fate was bound to theirs, long before he ever walked into the blizzard. The storm howled, the warship roared. The operatives backed away in terror, and Daniel rose slowly to his feet. The children in his arms glowing brighter than the falling snow. The twist echoing through the air like fate whispering its arrival. He wasn't just rescuing them, he was one of them. And the galaxy had finally come to reclaim what it had lost. The storm twisted itself into a spiral of white fury as Daniel stood beneath the hovering warship, its colossal shadows swallowing the valley in an otherworldly gloom. The alien children glowing against his chest like twin stars trying desperately to stay alive. And every breath he drew felt heavier than the last as the air vibrated with forces humanity had never witnessed. Forces that now centered on him. The operatives who had moments earlier threatened to seize the children now backed away as if facing a cosmic disaster, their boots crunching shakily in the snow. Weapons lowered not out of mercy but out of fear. Because the faint shimmering light beneath Daniel's skin had changed everything. That impossible glow that pulsed in time with the children's symbols. That undeniable proof that fate had tied him to something far beyond Earth. Far beyond human law. Far beyond anything these soldiers were trained to handle. The warship emitted a low resonant hum, a sound that rippled through the storm like the breath of an ancient titan. And suddenly streaks of silver light appeared across its hull, forming patterns that mirrored the glowing markings on the children's bodies. The ship responding not to weapons or threats, but to their presence. To their bond, to Daniel's awakening echo. The operative commander stumbled backward, visor trembling. Voice cracking through static headquarters. We have a catastrophic escalation. The Guardian signature is active. Repeat. A human Guardian has awakened, but their crackled uselessly. The frequencies overwhelmed by alien energy saturating the air. And the moment the word Guardian reached Daniel's ears, he felt something deep in his chest ignite. A pulse of recognition that didn't belong to his memories, yet felt undeniably his. As if a buried lineage had just opened its eyes inside him. The children sensed it too, their soft, glowing hands gripping his coat tighter. Their trembling easing slightly, not from safety, but from connection. As if his newly awakened presence stabilized their fading strength. And Daniel felt their emotions flood into him again. Raw and intense, not chaotic now, but full of desperate urgency. They were afraid not of the soldiers, not of the storm, not even of the warship, but of something far beyond it, something approaching. Something ancient and merciless. The sky answered their fear. A thunderous crack split through the clouds as a second rift of light tore open the atmosphere. But this time it wasn't gentle silver like the children's glow. It was violent, jagged. A searing red-gold tear in the sky that radiated dread so sharp Daniel felt his heart falter. The warship reacted instantly, blasting a powerful wave of energy outward that sent snow exploding in every direction, forming a protective dome around Daniel and the children. The operatives thrown off their feet by the shockwave, shouting in terror as their equipment erupted in sparks. Daniel staggered but didn't fall. Not when the children clutched him tighter. Not when the symbols beneath his skin shimmered brighter. Not when the universe seemed to tilt around him. Through the swirling snow, he saw it. A second warship emerging through the rift. Larger, darker, weapons active. its presence radiating an oppressive force that crushed the air from his lungs. The children cried out in perfect unison, their voices harmonic and agonized, their glow flaring like a distress beacon. And in that moment, Daniel understood with perfect clarity this second ship had not come for rescue. It had come for destruction, and it wanted the children dead. The first warship shifted position, shields activating with a roar of thunder. Its hull glowing fiercely as it placed itself between Daniel and the invading ship. Lines of ancient runes igniting across its surface like a warrior raising a shield carved in starlight. The operatives scrambled for cover behind their crippled SUVs, shouting into failing radios, their voices trembling with panic. Unknown hostile entity. Repeat, hostile. Planetary security breached. But their words barely mattered now because the battlefield forming in the sky was not built for humans. Not designed for Earth, it was galactic, ancient, inevitable, and somehow Daniel was at its center. The children's light surged brighter as the hostile warship charged an immense weapon beneath its prow. A swirling sphere of red energy growing in violent pulses, threatening to tear the very air apart. Daniel felt the shockwave before it even fired, the children whimpering in terror, their fear bleeding into him until he felt his own blood vibrate with their panic. He dropped to one knee, shielding them with everything he had. His heartbeat syncing with theirs, their markings syncing with his own awakening glow. And then the ancient voice returned, filling his mind with a force that made the world go silent. "Guardian, rise." Daniel gasped as the words struck through him. Not a command, but an activation, a key turning inside his soul, a forgotten inheritance unleashing itself, and his skin ignited with threads of shimmering light, faint but growing, warm but powerful. As if the dormant part of him the children had awakened now surged to life in response to danger. The hostile warship fired. A beam of red-gold annihilation split the sky with a scream of distorted energy, rushing toward the valley with the power to vaporize mountains. The first warship reacted instantly, unleashing a shield of blinding silver light. The two energies colliding with a catastrophic explosion that sent shockwaves ripping through the storm like tidal waves of fire and ice. The ground shuddered violently, trees bowing sideways, snow lifting into spirals that danced like ghosts in a hurricane. The impact force so immense Daniel felt it in his bones. The children pressed their foreheads to his chest and cried, the markings on their skin pulsing desperately as if begging him to do something even though he didn't know how, didn't know what he was, didn't know why the universe had suddenly placed the fate of two alien children, and possibly Earth itself, into his unprepared hands. But the ancient voice whispered again through the chaos, "Protect them, and the galaxy will remember your line. Fail, and worlds will fall." The hostile ship charged for a second strike, its weapon core glowing with deadly intensity. Daniel rose slowly to his feet, snow swirling violently around him, alien energy flickering through his veins, the children glowing brighter in his arms as if drawing power from him or giving it. And for the first time he felt it clearly. The spark inside him wasn't human. It wasn't dormant, it wasn't small, it was destiny. And if he didn't stand now, if he didn't embrace what he was becoming, then Earth would be the first world to burn and the galaxy would follow. Daniel took a breath that tasted like storm and starlight, held the children close, and stepped toward the warship battle in the sky. Not as a soldier, not as a rescuer, but as the guardian he had never known he was meant to be. The sky blazed with clashing light as Daniel stepped forward through the roaring storm, each step sinking into snow that vibrated with the violent energy of two warships dueling overhead. The children pressed against his chest, glowing brighter with every heartbeat, their small bodies trembling with fear and something else too. Something like a rising echo of power they didn't fully understand. And Daniel felt that same echo inside himself. A warmth turning slowly into heat. A heat turning slowly into force. Building beneath his skin like a star waking inside a mortal frame. Above him, the defending warship struggled to hold the silver shield intact as the hostile vessel hammered it, with another barrage of red-gold energy. Each impact erupting into a thunderous shockwave that rippled across the valley, sending walls of snow blasting outward like the earth itself was exhaling in pain. And Daniel had to brace himself against the force as his legs trembled from the pressure. The children clutching him harder as though his heartbeat was the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. The symbols beneath their skin pulsed in frantic rhythm, syncing with his own glowing threads. Their emotions pouring into him in waves of desperation. Sorrow, hope, and something sharper recognition. The knowledge that he was becoming something he wasn't meant to survive. Something powerful enough to draw the attention of ancient forces and dangerous enough to terrify. The operatives who once tried to seize the children. The commander rose shakily from behind an overturned SUV, visor cracked and flickering, shouting across the wind with a voice that carried fear instead of authority. "Hey, stop moving toward the ship. You don't understand what your activation means. If your echo fully awakens Earth, becomes a target in a war we cannot win." Daniel barely heard them through the intensity of the storm and the energy rising inside him, because the children's emotions drowned out everything else. Their fear coating his thoughts like frost. Their trust warming the cracks inside his spirit with something unbearably tender. And he felt their hearts thudding against his chest in perfect rhythm with his own. 3 fragile pulses tight together beneath a sky tearing itself apart. Another blast struck the defending warship and the shield buckled, flickering violently, silver runes shattering into sparks that fell like dying stars. The massive vessel groaning under the force as if crying out in pain. And Daniel felt the children react instantly. Their glow dimming with a tremor of anguish that ran through their small bodies. The younger one made a faint sound, a soft harmonic cry that vibrated through Daniel's ribs. And that sound carried a terrible realization into his mind. The defending warship wasn't just protecting him. It was connected to the children in a way that bound their survival to its own. Every impact against the ship echoing through their fragile forms like invisible wounds. Daniel's throat tightened, and he pulled them closer, whispering through the roaring wind, even though he knew they didn't need words to understand him. "I won't let them hurt you, not again." Not ever. The younger child lifted their glowing hand weakly, placing it against his neck as though trying to anchor themselves to him. But when their skin touched his, something shifted violently. A surge of alien warmth rushed from their palm into his spine, flooding his body like molten light, and Daniel gasped as visions burst across his mind. A throne world bathed in silver light, a line of guardians standing beneath a star-forged banner. A dying empire scattering its last royal children across the galaxy, a prophecy carved into nebulae. Naming a lost echo who would awaken in a species not meant to carry such power, he saw battles that cracked planets. Wars fought in total silence between civilizations made of light. The collapse of a dynasty that had once shaped galaxies. And in the center of the final vision, he saw himself, not as a soldier, not as a rescuer, but as a bridge between worlds carrying a burden older than Earth. When the vision faded, Daniel dropped to one knee, breath ripped from his lungs. Snow swirling madly around him as though reacting to the rising energy in his blood. The children trembling as their glow flared dangerously bright. The commander stumbled closer. Voice hoarse with terror, "If the echo ascends, the hostile fleet will follow. Do you hear me, Hale? They will burn this planet down to erase the last royal line." A roar thundered across the sky as the hostile warship charged another massive shot. Red energy spiraling into a devastating core. And the defending vessels spiraled lower, struggling, shields failing. Lights dimming as if bowing under an impossible burden, The children both cried out. Their harmonized voices filled with unbearable sorrow. A cry so powerful it shook the air, cracked the ice beneath Daniel's boots, and rippled through his heart like a blade of grief. And he suddenly understood they thought the defending warship was going to die. They thought their last guardian was about to fall. Daniel's arms tightened with fierce instinct. And he rose again, slow but unyielding, snow exploding outward from his boots as if the ground itself feared his. Awakening strength, the glow beneath his skin now bright enough that the operative stared in horrified awe. Weapons forgotten entirely. The hostile beam fired the defending warship's shields collapsed. The sky blazed red as annihilation streaked downward. The children clung to Daniel and screamed, their glow exploding into wild patterns that danced across his arms and chest. And the ancient voice thundered through his mind at full force. Guardian, your line awakens, stand or worlds fall. Daniel lifted his gaze to the falling beam, his breath steady despite the universe cracking above him, and felt the children's energy swirling into him. Trusting him, becoming part of him, he stepped forward into the blinding light, every instinct screaming not in fear but in rising power. And in that moment, with the fate of Earth hanging by a thread, Daniel Hale finally understood the truth. He wasn't meant to survive this, he was meant to rise from it. He drew the children against his heart, lifted his glowing hand toward the heavens, and braced for the moment destiny collided with him like a star being born. The beam descended like the wrath of a dying star, a roaring column of red-gold light tearing through the storm and splitting the sky in a single blinding line. Its force so immense the air screamed as molecules shredded under the pressure, and the world felt suspended between one heartbeat and the next as Daniel stood in its path with the children held tightly against him, their glowing markings swirling in frantic patterns that traced across his chest like constellations being drawn by trembling hands. He didn't think, he didn't doubt, he didn't fear. He simply let the energy inside him rise. The alien warmth that had slept inside his blood for all his life, now awakening in a blaze of starlight. The children's trust filling the last hollow places inside him. And as the beam thundered closer, Daniel lifted his hand toward the heavens. A motion so small compared to the immensity of what met it, yet so absolute in its purpose that even the storm seemed to bow around him. When the beam struck, the world should have ended instead. The universe held its breath, light collided with light, power collided with destiny. Time itself trembled. A sphere of radiant silver erupted from Daniel's hand, expanding outward with a soft resonance that felt impossibly gentle for something so vast. A protective bloom of shimmering energy that curved around him and the children like a cosmic embrace. The beam slamming into it with a violent shriek, only to be dissolved upon contact. Red gold fury folding into silver luminescence that rippled across the valley in quiet waves. The operatives shielded their faces, their visors overwhelmed with static, their bodies thrown to the snow as if witnessing a myth made real. The sky illuminated in a dance of warring colors as the hostile beam broke apart into harmless dust, drifting downward like sparks from a dying forge. Daniel did not fall. He did not break. He did not burn. He did not burn. His feet remained firm in the snow, his heartbeat steady as the children's glow intertwined with his, forming a triad of light that hummed like a celestial chord, resonant and impossibly ancient. The hostile warship faltered in midair, its lights flickering, its weapon core destabilizing as if confused or terrified by what it had encountered. And for the first time in its monstrous presence, Daniel felt something he hadn't expected. Fear not his own, but the ship's. The children pressed their glowing foreheads to his chest, eyes closed, their tiny hands resting over the center of his heart where the silver markings now pulsed visibly through his skin, synchronizing with theirs in perfect harmony. and Daniel felt their relief wash through him like the warm tide of a long-lost home returning at last. The defending warship stabilized above them, its hull glowing with renewed strength. Runes brightening as if recognizing Daniel fully now. Not as a temporary protector, not as an anomaly, but as the guardian whose lineage had once walked among their kind. A beam of soft silver light descended from beneath the ship, enveloping the three of them in a gentle column of warmth that melted the nearby snow in a perfect circle. An invitation, a recognition, a bow from a vessel older than human civilization. Daniel stepped forward slowly, carrying the children toward the beam, the storm quieting around him as though acknowledging the end of its vigil. The wind softening into a whisper as flakes drifted like feathers in a cathedral of frozen air. The hostile warship roared again, a final desperate attempt to regain control, powering its core in a frantic surge. But before it could fire another shot, a new presence filled the sky. Not a voice this time, but a pulse of sound that vibrated through the planet itself. An ancient command echoing across dimensions. Enough. The hostile ship froze, mid-charge its lights, dimmed its engines, stuttered. Its hull cracked in thin fractal lines that glowed and then dissolved into dust, disintegrating without explosion, without debris, without violence, simply ceasing to exist as though erased from the ledger of the universe. Silence followed a silence heavy with awe, with fear, with understanding. Daniel felt the children's breathing steady against him, their glows deepening into calm warmth that pulsed like two small suns cradled safely in his arms. And when he looked down at them, they gazed up with silver eyes, illuminated not by fear now, but by recognition so profound it made his throat tighten. They placed their tiny hands on his chest again, right over the glowing echo beneath his skin. And this time the emotion that flowed into him was clear love, not the simple kind, the ancient kind. The kind reserved for those chosen by fate across lifetimes when he stepped fully into the descending beam. The defending warship hummed in resonance, a sound like 1,000 memories waking at once. And Daniel felt weight lift from his shoulders, not responsibility, not duty, but grief. The quiet lifelong ache of a man who had spent years saving others without knowing who could save him. Now he knew it was them. It had always been them. The light lifted all three into the warship. A graceful ascent that felt less like being taken and more like returning. And as Earth's snowy valley grew smaller beneath him, he felt a profound certainty settle into his bones. He would return someday, not as a soldier, not as a wanderer, but as a bridge, a guardian one, whose destiny reached beyond Earth. Beyond the storm, beyond the warships and laws that once tried to decide his fate. The universe had claimed him, the children had chosen him, and somewhere across star systems, forces older than empires whispered his name with reverence and terror alike. As the warship turned toward the sky and the clouds parted before its shimmering light, Daniel Howled held the two alien children close, their hearts beating quietly against his. And he whispered a promise carried into the stars. I won't let your line end, not while I live, not while I breathe. And the galaxy answered in a whisper of distant starlight. A new guardian had risen, and the universe would never be the same.